You know, the research for this video started off as a fun venture through the entire history of this goofy mechanic where your TV asexually reproduces, but man, oh man, look, I am just as nostalgic for couch co-op as any other 20X-year-old, but I can't ignore the fact that fixing multiplayer with split screen is like killing the mosquito on your friend's head with a crowbar. To most people, splitting the screen is often seen as a compromise, because it is. Your typical local multiplayer experience won't struggle to have all the players on the screen at once. It's in cases where the gameplay revolves around a focus being on a single character that you really need to split the screen if you want to enjoy it with others. Shooters and racers seem to be the main culprit of this. Unless it's a top-down view, the games in these genres seem to be the most demanding of having your own screen space, not just so each player can have their own HUD to display information unique to the individual, but also for the sake of immersion. The camera being in first person or even just a third-person close-up has such a different feeling from a camera floating in space 10 yards away. It's the difference between telling someone how to make a delicious stir-fry when you could just go full Raccacoonie mode and get in on the action yourself. There's a prime example of this in Kirby Air Ride. Compare the top ride mode where the gameplay has the camera pulled back far enough for all players to be visible at once, versus the Air Ride mode which brings the camera much closer and feels like an immediate immersive breath of fresh air, until your sticky Kool-Aid faced cousin comes and plugs in a second controller. Why I spent all this time learning about a dying game mechanic is beyond me. I mean, the whole damn game industry has been shifting focus toward the online multiplayer experience since they realize most gamers have already decided the body pillows are better company than actual human beings, and I am not an exception. And while sharing your screen real estate can feel a lot like someone just dropped an anvil on your chest, there is more than one way to slice this pie, or split this screen, some of which may feel like they're just trying to make this experience as painless as possible, and others feel like they're making it personal. When it comes to the orientation of a split screen, horizontal seems to be the fan favorite, which makes sense in most cases since their eyes sit beside each other and not the funny way. But man, if there was ever a game to do it the funny way, Lord knows it'd be Borderlands. And while this does limit your horizontal depth of view, a lot of people do actually seem to enjoy this style since the HUD and subtitles are now more visible. But typically, you'll find this type of split is reserved for games that actually need a more vertical range of view. It Takes Two is one such example since the gameplay features plenty of vertical platforming with you climbing trees, playsets, the pressure of fixing a shattered marriage or a fucking washing machine for once in your life. Oh, but the horizontal versus vertical split screen debate is child's play compared to what's going on in the 3-player split screen category. If you're the second player, then you'll likely just end up with a full screen at a fourth its size, but assuming you did win the 3-way rock, paper, scissors, then you probably ended up with an entire half of the TV that's usually given to the first or third players in games like Halo 2, which yeah, might start a bar fight or two, but it's not actually as unfair as it may seem. Yes, player 1 definitely has the biggest screen, but now they don't have as much horizontal range of view as the other players, which I'd say is arguably paramount in a first-person shooter. So, good job, Halo. Oh? The first Halo? Oh, So yeah, then we step back a couple years to Halo Combat Evolved, which decided to give that half of the screen to a horizontal orientation. Why? Cause
hi, I'm Mr. Split, and I hate children. And what better way is there to exterminate a portion of the child population than to just make them want to do it themselves?
But playing a 3-player game doesn't have to jeopardize the safety of your kids, cause there is another popular method for splitting the screen 3 ways. I call it the f*** you, nobody wins, and despite the name I've decided to give it, I think the f*** you, nobody wins version is probably my favorite. Not only does everyone get an equally sized screen, but also the 4th slot can be filled with something useful to everyone. Or not. F*** you, nobody wins. And while splitting the screen with these beautifully straight, interconnected lines that stay perfectly still is functional and all, it's also boring! Get that shit out of here, I want to get weird! Split screens clearly aren't just problematic. They do solve the problem of playing certain games locally, but having more than one screen on a TV creates a multitude of other problems that developers just have to dance around to avoid making anyone buy a separate console. I mean, by this point, you'd probably sanely assume that splitting the screen can only be done by 2, 3, or 4 players, but guess what? It actually doesn't stop there. I mean, it fucking should, but it doesn't. The first and most obvious problem is the fact that your screen has been reduced to at least half its standard size, which is pain. Good thing I'm on that Simulview morphine. Blech. I've recently started shitting blood actually, so I should probably stop taking it. Simulview is a PS3 exclusive experience where games like Killzone 3 would split not the screen, but the frame rate in half. A constant 240Hz flickering that would show the first player glasses one set of images, and the second player glasses would only see the second set of images. And all it required on top of your PS3 and all its standard accessories was a Simulview 3D TV, a pair of Simulview glasses, 2 of them, and a game that actually supports Simulview technology, which thankfully we're just fucking spoiled for choice for with an entire entire catalog of 6 games! But assuming you want your wallet to remain a tad heavier than helium, then you're just gonna have to put up with a screen half its typical size, since without Simulview, there isn't really a way out. A Way Out released as a split-screen exclusive game, which is a risky move since gamers don't really like looking at small screens, or they're humans for that matter. So to remedy this, they decided to have the screen adjust in size depending on what's more appropriate for that character. You see, most times it's an even split, but then it could shrink to replicate the feelings of claustrophobia when crawling through a vent, or maybe grow to give emphasis to the bozo who's rowing their boat gently off a cliff, which is probably the best remedy I've seen for this issue. Another considerable problem is the idea of screen peeking, which is when you look at a screen that's not yours to get the upper hand. Games like Zombie U fix this by just here you go. I call these the severed screens. You see, because it's like a split screen, but you already get it. You see, typically screen peeking or screen hopping is just grounds for a swirly or an atomic wedgie, but in games like Pac-Man Vs, lethal injection. It's not exclusive to competitive games though. Some cooperative games like The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures have all the players on the TV at once, then if you do something like enter a building or a cave, your screen is then transferred to your GBA, giving you your own little window to watch a small elf boy drown to death, which is something we all need in our lives. You know what else we need in our lives? A screen that prioritizes whichever player is progressing in the level, and then rather than the screen just stopping the progression of the moving character, actually pulls the other player with the camera and off a cliff. Why? Because
Hi, I'm Mr. Split.
this was how 3D platformers like LEGO Star Wars went about keeping both players on the screen at the same time, and also keeping the oxygen out of the lungs of your little brother. Until they decided to incorporate a little mechanic known as the dynamic split screen. And while this wasn't the first game to use it, it was my first exposure to the beauty of a screen that would not only separate and rejoin depending on how far you were from the other player, but also acted as a sort of GPS for where others were relative to you. So now when you hear Lego Yoda Death Sound on MP3, you'll know it's no one's fault but your own. Oh yeah, that sound's not in this game, huh? The Lego Lord giveth and the Lego Lord taketh away. And then he came back and gave you a titty twister. So as you can see, these weirdo split screens usually aren't just switching things up because they're in a silly, goofy mood. It's to serve some kind of purpose. No more squinting, screen peeking, or tug of war. Even in the case of the staggered split screen, where it seems like you're losing visibility on an already small screen, it's actually being done so the devs can put valuable HUD materials off to the side of your screen rather than having it potentially blocking a baddie with a boomstick. Effectively saving your field of vision rather than needlessly wasting any precious screen real estate. Why are you like this? Resident Evil 5 is a good case of what happens when you split the screen without accommodating for the fact that you're now sharing a TV. It's a 16:9 aspect ratio, shrunken down and shifted to the side to get both players on screen, but they didn't widen the horizontal view like any mentally stable game designer would, or at the very least shift the HUD materials off to the side to make up for it. It really does seem like these issues were most prevalent in the earlier, more formative years of split screen, before people got the idea to make a game that encourages screen peeking as a mechanic. So that begs the question, where did it all start? As I said earlier, the necessity for split screens at all is faded in recent years thanks to the accessibility and convenience of online multiplayer. So to find out where split screen multiplayer began, our peepers are going to have to predate the gamer equivalent of the birth of Christ, aka Xbox Live. Halo as a series is widely known for its multiplayer experience. Dipping your virtual nuts in your best bud's mouth while calling their mother a homosexual is a part of this game's identity. And even though Xbox Live and Halo go together like two nuts in a mouth, the first game in the series actually released a few months before Xbox Live was even ready, which made splitting the screen necessary if you wanted to play with friends. So yes, Halo definitely had a hand in making people want to jump on the split screen FPS blaster buddy in the brains bandwagon, but this style of multiplayer was already in full swing at this point thanks to a little rare gem by the name of GoldenEye. You see, at this time, plenty of FPS titles were already multiplayer, but they all required a dial-up connection or other means of connecting more than one console to a multiplayer network. So, when Nintendo approached Rare to make a game for the latest Bond film on their sleek and sexual new console, the No Internet Yet 64, they said, "Oh, no internet? But how else are me and my buddy supposed to karate chop Odd Job Skull in?" Wait, what? Making GoldenEye the first FPS with split-screen capabilities that I could find. To be honest, whether this was the first split-screen FPS or not isn't entirely relevant since there's a certain gaming genre that's been splitting the screen since before I was even a jizz. Can you guess what it is? Mixing the family fun motto of Nintendo with the racing genre is an easy recipe for splitting the screen. And while the Mario Kart series has supported split screen since 1992, Mario's actually been beaten by a certain Superman seat-grabbing bitch Sorry, the Excitebike guy was my school bully. Excitebike came out in 1984, but it wasn't until the 1988 re-release titled Versus Excitebike that the game would receive split-screen functionality. A pretty neat horizontal split that, thanks to graphical limitations, would allow your character to hop out of their screen with a fat enough wheelie, which is pretty cool, but also fucking lame since it still isn't the first split screen. A quick Google search would probably tell you that Dragster was the first, which released in 1980, and well, you wouldn't be wrong to believe that. Except you would, and you'd be dumb. And probably a little bitch, but luckily for you, you're a Slippy Boy enjoyer, so you know damn well that the split screen goes back farther than this. But just how far is the question? Some might say that Space Race is the first case of splitting the screen, which came out nearly 7 years before Dragster. And while the screen is definitely divided for 2 players, there's not any scrolling or anything different happening on either side. In fact, you can see asteroids hurtle from one end of the screen straight through to the other, uninterrupted. So no, this is not a real split screen. No, the earliest game I could find with an authentic split screen was Drag Race, which released an entire 3 years before Dragster came and ripped it off. And you know what? This game fucks. Just look at this shit. You got not just one, but 2 sons of bitches shifting gears, speeding down the I-90 at 8,000 miles per millisecond. Whoa, what's this? Jimmy just pulled out his favorite manga. Now's not the time to figure out who's the best quintuplet, man. We got bigger problems ahead. Oh shit, he hasn't shifted gears. Jimmy, the engine's gonna blow! Jimmy, no. Jimmy, no. Oh, they just gave him a new car. Alright, he's fine. Okay, while the gameplay isn't anything to write home about, there's still something to be said about the first game to ever split the screen. Like, ew. But also, wow, you've got 2 separate players in 2 separate locations on one screen. Which, yeah, is a simple, obvious, nearly 50-year-old concept at this point, but it's these types of no-duh solutions that are responsible for the biggest changes in any creative industry. I know I've been ragging on the concept of sharing your screen with someone, but being able to split the screen in a mundane or wacky-ass way has allowed people like you and your Kool-Aid-faced cousin to enjoy games all the way from Halo to Kanagawa Jet Girls on one console. Well, maybe don't play Kanagawa Jet Girls with your little cousin. Point is, split screen has been bringing people together with games that would have been otherwise solo or strictly online multiplayer experience, and it's been doing so for nearly 50 years, which is so cool. With an industry that's been persistently pushing an exclusively online multiplayer experience, it's really cool to see games like Fortnite go out of their way to include split screen functionality rather than starting out with it as a mainstay and removing it, because Lord knows it's not saving them any money to add it in. But I think that says a lot about where the future of multiplayer games is headed. It may be kind of a slow process, but it seems to me like AAA game studios are realizing the best multiplayer option to work into your game is to give the player the option. Because yeah, I may be living with Double D McGee over here, but I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called it. Yeah, you have a name. I know you have a name. I'm sorry. Some people do actually enjoy hanging out with other people, and even though I'm not the biggest fan of putting my TV through a guillotine, I am sincerely hopeful that split screens are here to stay, so gamers around the world can taste each other's gonads not just online, but in person as well. And with that being said, I'm gonna make like a screen and split. like a split screen. Ah! When are you gonna grow up, man?